think I'm so crazy, but we're just going green. People think we're so crazy, but we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green.
And a very good afternoon, Phuket, and it's Nick Anthony, and it is the Going Green show number 69. It's Saturday the 30th of March, and the time is 3:07. Hope you're having a fantastic day out there. It is indeed beautifully sunny, and with some cloud, the temperature has eased slightly. We've been involved the last 2 weeks with a serious heat wave, something that I haven't experienced over the last 11 years on Phuket. We've seen temperature range up from 34, 36 on a daily basis, up as high as 41 degrees on the island last weekend. And indeed, that is hot, hot, hot. We've also seen less rain. You will have noticed so far this year we've got about 65 millimeters of rain in the last 3 months, and that's against a average of over 200 mil. So we're down about 75% on rainfall, and hoping now with Songkran coming up that indeed this weather pattern will break, and we're well overdue for some showers. This afternoon's show, I'm talking about a world in trouble and capitalists' call for market revolutions. This is part 3 of the show. The last 2 Saturdays I've been talking about the current system of capitalism and how it's outmoded and, as some punters are saying, suicidal. Indeed, increasing numbers of capitalist leaders are pushing for fundamental change. Today's show, and we've been talking about a breakthrough change for capitalism, is all about implementation and talking about direct action that businesses and people can do to try to avert some of this crisis and try to instead provide some positive impetus for change. Well, there are 7 primary direct drivers of extinction, and all are the result of human behavior. All, I must say, can be changed. The first is habitat loss through deforestation. The second is takeover by invasive species. Air, sea, and land pollution is, of course, a major one, something we see here on the island, although I'm pleased to report a continuing push to reduce waste, to reduce litter, and to reduce the amount of plastic going into our oceans. The fourth is climate change, and the last month all over the world, we've seen impending changes happening much faster than people had previously forecast. The fifth is the over-exploitation of resources, and indeed here on the island it includes beaches, beach takeover, includes building up on the mountain where they shouldn't be, and of course building on slopes when they shouldn't because it is too steep. The factors that magnify all of the others are the last 2, and that is overpopulation as the world goes towards 9 billion people, and consumerization. There is smart consumerization, there is sustainable consumerization, and there's also, as we well know, blind destruction of the planet consumerization. Well, today's show we're talking about some solutions that businesses can put in place, and indeed if you did miss the last couple of shows, you can listen to part 1 on playback. Go to the PhuketNews.com, click over to the radio link, and you'll see playback, and part 1 of these 3 shows is indeed up on it. Also in today's show, I'll be addressing local news, including the Turtle Foundation release yesterday up at the JW Marriott in Macau. A fantastic turnout, I must say. Kun Sean at the JW and the team at IUCN and the Turtle Foundation put on a fantastic session. There must have been well over 250 people, and they released around 80 turtles. Turtle price is about 2,500 baht, so they raised about 120, 140,000 baht for the Turtle Foundation. So well done to Kun Sean and the team, and I'll be talking more about that. We're also looking at international news, including 2 new releases of electric cars during the week, as well as a new Peugeot, which I was quite interested in. That is, in fact, hybrid air. It is the car of the future, and it does indeed run on air. So we'll be looking at that. There's also a good BBC article this week on a global gridlock, asking the question, what if everyone had a car? Of course, that would be a major problem. State of the Planet, which is an annual address, took place yesterday in the US. We'll be talking about that. This particular State of the Planet address was on water security. And we're also going to be looking at an article from Bloomberg talking about renewable reserves. Of course, we know about oil reserves and gold reserves, proven and probable, and we know what's in the ground. But the questions come up, and it's actually a question posed by BP and financed by BP to look at renewable reserves and looking initially at wind and palm oil, and indeed what in the US and Brazil specifically is potentially available. They will use this research then to extrapolate across the world and look for other opportunities to extend and expand renewable campaigns. Good news out of India, there's a new tiger reserve that makes it now a 350,000 acre reserve in the Tamil Nadu. It's a southern Indian state, and it's now the world's largest tiger reserve, which is fantastic news. And lastly, in terms of big news, the IMF has called over the week for an end to energy subsidies. Removing worldwide fossil fuel subsidies is worth about $2 trillion a year and would have major gains for economic growth and the environment. So we'll be taking a look at it. A great show coming up. Stay tuned. This is Nick Anthony. This is Going Green, show number 69.
Nick Anthony, caring about your island home. This is Going Green on Live 89.5.
Welcome back to the Going Green show. I'm talking about accelerating sustainable change. And indeed, business is increasingly critical in tackling the world's great environmental, social, and governance challenges. And at the heart of business sits a grouping of senior executives who direct what we call the enterprise. It's a constellation of around 1,100 companies worldwide that now control around half of the world's market capitalization. A series of articles in The Guardian has been addressed specifically to them and those who advise them. The last two Going Green shows, I've introduced this concept of breakthrough and indeed looked at some of the issues that if we do nothing, of course it will happen. And there has been a follow-up article from that called A World in Trouble, Capitalist Call for Market Revolutions, that was in something called the CSR Wire, written by the authors John Elkington and Susie Braun. They said that amid the signs that the current system of capitalism is outmoded and suicidal, increasing number of capitalist leaders are pushing for fundamental change. Well, it must be in real trouble, the world, if even the capitalists are beginning to call for market revolutions. We've heard people from all sorts of different organizations, including Peter Backer, who's the president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who calls for a revolution of capitalism. And what he means is that markets must learn how to value and manage multiple forms of capital, including the human, social, and, importantly, the natural forms. Like-minded leaders like Richard Branson, founder of the Virgin Group, Paul Polman, CEO of Unilever, and Jochen Zeitz, who's the former CEO of Puma, also sing similar songs. There was a Breakthrough Capitalism forum last year. Speaker after speaker stressed that the inertia of the old economic order is now a massive constraint on the necessary system change. The system is blind to potentially existential threats, says Jeremy Leggett, who's a leading solar energy entrepreneur. He argues that the current order is dysfunctional, almost to the point of being suicidal. Well, our climate is changing, says Michael Bloomberg, and indeed, even President Obama, during his speech, said that, in fact, Sandy, the massive storm that hit the east coast of the US, should compel all elected leaders to take immediate action. Followed up by Peter Backer, who's the World Bank Development President, said the world is on fire. Governments too often are failing to act, and the question now is whether business can begin to fill the gap in a meaningful way. Well, there were three scenarios, and indeed the first is breakdown, which is a very bleak scenario. It's a world in which the early experiments indeed have not worked. Enthusiasm fades, businesses, cities, and economies overshoot critical planetary boundaries. That's obviously not a great scenario, but there are instances and countries that are heading towards that scenario. Change, as usual, is the scenario where earnest efforts are made, such as CSR, socially responsible investing, and sustainability reporting, but overall the outcome is little more than a set of patches on the existing dysfunctional system. Breakthrough is what we have been talking about. This is the third scenario, and this assumes that with the usual ups and downs, the trajectory of our societies and economies is pointed toward a very different set of outcomes. During the week, we heard from the EU that they're aiming to go to 40% reduction in carbon by 2060. The previous target was 20% by 2030. That's the type of trajectory and that's the type of breakthrough that is required. Innovators, entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, and investors, and crucially the policymakers, managed to work together to build a new system fit for purpose as we move towards 9 billion neighbors. Progress is achieved through ventures that dare to set ambitious targets and then over time drive them through to change the market and the political systems within which they operate. The Breakthrough Initiative, which urges businesses to get involved in shaping a world fit for this population of 9 billion, is part of a longer journey, and it's an opportunity to sketch a roadmap for our future. Well, how can we make sure that your business is at the cutting edge, developing a coherent, resilient breakthrough strategy? The first thing, just like our own simple programs here on Phuket Island at an individual level, is all about awareness. Breakthrough change programs do require continuous and consistent communication. In the case of a business, it involves the board and the C-suite, that is the corporate suite, the guys who run the joint, and also requires covering the entire organization. A good example is, of course, a local hotel where they appoint someone to be their CSR director and over time to take more responsibility on overall sustainability, to communicate to all employees, including the board above them and employees below them, about sustainability and indeed why programs like energy efficiency, like waste efficiency, and supporting the local community is indeed so important. So it does require covering the entire organization. Part of that program and process is all about education. Employees need to be briefed on the why, what, and the how. It does involve education, it involves training, and it covers a mix of theory, practical applications, and motivational components. That includes getting out into the community, being involved with schools, being involved with beach cleanups, going over to places like the incinerator or the waste management center here on Phuket, looking at waste firsthand and seeing the crisis that we're under. It involves perhaps getting involved in the education of our own energy system. Where does our energy on the island come from? What powers Phuket? And indeed, what are the demands of the future? And what are going to be the requirements of our own energy system in the future? So education of your employees, not just a simple local hotel level or at a business level, but in a wider macro prospect. It's important that they get a big picture idea of what's going on and what's coming down the pipeline. So two first things we've been talking about here is with a business, any business, whether it be small or big. The first two things that you must do are create awareness. Breakthrough change programs will come from that. And then through that process, get involved with education. This is Nick Anthony. You're listening to Going Green, show number 69, and we're talking about breakthroughs in business and preparing for the future, a future that's becoming increasingly uncertain.
With the issues that matter to the island, the environment, and the planet, this is Going Green with Nick Anthony on Live 89.5.
Welcome back to the Going Green Show, show number 69. We're talking about breakthrough changes for corporations and specifically, and even for local businesses. We've been looking at the type of changes we need to implement here on the island, and the first two steps to making change, the first is awareness, and the second is education of your employees, specifically on the why, the what, and the how to make change. Well, the key to start with this is to have some projects. It's for your employees to be involved, and not simply on big-ticket items. Well-designed, small initiatives showing quick and transparent results stimulate and sustain the overall change process. A good example here on Phuket is the formation of the Kamala Green Club by Steve at Andara and the team over at Paressa. And together they've now got around 15 hotels and about another 10 or 15 businesses together, working with the Orbitor and working with also local NGOs, such as the Phuket Has Been Good to Us Foundation. And they're creating momentum within the community for change. The first things that are happening are recycling stations that are being privately funded around Surin Beach. teaching local communities, local businesses, as well as local homes about recycling, a reduction of waste, how to do composting, why we should indeed clean our beaches and why we should keep our environment clean from the perspective of one, plastic in the gutters, etc., will breed mosquitoes. And the second being that plastic in gutters, when it rains, go out into the ocean and get eaten by turtles and dolphins and other marine animals. And they die from this. They actually think that plastic bags in particular, in dolphins' cases, are jellyfish. So they eat the plastic bags, and of course it blocks up their stomach, and they're unable to eat, and they die effectively of starvation. Over 50% of all turtles that are found dead on Phuket in a post-mortem show large quantities of plastic bags in their stomach. I'll talk more after the break and after the top of the hour about the Turtle Foundation release yesterday, trying to repopulate Phuket's turtle communities. And indeed, I just heard this afternoon about turtles being spotted off the Kamala headland down there off Cape Sol and at the tip of Patong. So good news, there are turtles in our local waters, there are dolphins in our local waters, and there are also whales. Indeed, 2 weeks ago, a whale shark was seen swimming down in Chalong Bay, and it's apparently quite a favorite spot for them. So local projects, get your employees involved and get them involved in small things, but critical things for the health of the local area. The other important aspect for an organization, and it's central to the success, is the caliber and stamina of the team developing these projects, managing the communications, catalyzing these incentive programs, and holding business units to account. That's effectively your infrastructure. And easier when you have a large hotel, you have dedicated people for CSR that can move into this sustainability type of role, that can handle communications, that can create these incentive programs, and then also track results in a positive way and show that, in fact, change is taking place. One of those examples in today's edition of the Phuket News is on page 5. There's an article about mosquitoes and dengue fever. Good news is that the PPHO, the Phuket Provisional Health Office Disease Control Group, told the Phuket News that during 2012, 355 people reportedly caught dengue fever, with one person dying from it. So far this year, from January to March, there has been a case of only 63 reported cases, but no deaths. So that's down around 20% on the average. This is coming largely from the cleanup that the local provincial government is now doing on roadsides and around people's houses and businesses. Communicating a clean environment is a healthy environment, and by reducing plastic in the drains specifically, reducing breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and directly reducing dengue fever. This is the first time we've seen a reduction in the dengue numbers, and hats off to the Orbitjor, to Kun Paibun and the team for enacting an island-wide litter campaign, specifically now cleaning the roadsides twice a month before they cut the grass. And we saw the announcement in the Phuket News last week from the government, aiming for a 30% reduction in overall waste volume by 2016 within 3 years. And a follow-up from that last week was held in Kamala with the Kamala Green Group, indeed, where the local community is now putting in place curbside recycling, and they're putting in recycling stations for the local community to drop off their goods. Next step will be for them to get into composting on a more commercial scale, particularly working with all the restaurants in Kamala. And second phase will be to start working on water quality, monitoring, checking, and then working on the overall change process. Water is a great one because it is transparent. The results do stimulate change, and it does indeed catalyze further programs and holds businesses to account. So something like a water project in your area ticks all of those boxes, and it's great for communication, and it's good to see that type of change. So map your organization against this breakthrough criteria. Check the initiatives and models, and make sure that your business is future ready. Make sure it's ambitious, be fair, and be prepared to be disruptive. A key part of this challenge is thinking around the corners. One good example was during the week, Sir Mark Moody Stewart demonstrated this ability when he assured the press that oil-rich Middle East could well emerge as a future pioneer in the solar sector. Who would have thought so? And also looking around corners is what successful investors do, such as Warren Buffett. He's investing up to $2.5 billion in what is billed as America's largest solar operation. So think around the corners, do things differently, be ambitious, be fair, and be prepared to be disruptive. This is Nick Anthony. You're listening to The Going Green Show.
This is Going Green on Live 89.5.
Welcome back, Going Green Show. I hope you're having a fantastic afternoon. It's a beautiful day out there and nice to be a little bit cooler. We're talking this afternoon about breakthroughs and talking about effectively big business, but looking at it from a micro business, a small business perspective, and what can be done here on the island, and indeed what needs to take place across corporations the world over. It's called Breakthrough, and it's been a series of articles. Today is the third that we've been looking at over the last 3 weeks about breakthrough and breakthrough strategies. And the last couple of things as a business, aside from putting in place awareness, education, starting initial projects and setting up the infrastructure, that is managing communications, incentive programs, and holding business units to account, is to actually convene breakthrough champions. And it's setting the right sort of stretch goals and targets. So invite the most innovative people in your organization to help sketch a breakthrough trajectory for your organization, for key stakeholders, or even for your current and potential competitors. So who's going to champion this? And if you don't have a CSO, a Chief Sustainability Officer, here on the island, I've actually never come across a business that has a CSO. So you must appoint someone who is interested and knowledgeable in sustainability to map the future. You must embrace change. Identify which systemic challenges have the biggest implications for the future of your business and which you are or could be best placed to tackle. What sort of partnerships would you need to break through? What sort of investment? And with what sort of payback periods might be involved? Feed your team's imagination and help build critical mass. Perhaps host a breakthrough lab, including outsiders, and make sure you pull in some unusual suspects. Remember, whatever the nature and scale of your business, you can help catalyze system change if you identify the right leverage points and get the timing right. Governments, for this reason and others, are often letting us all down. They must catch up, and they must catch up fast. And that means their voters, all of us, have to help them do so. The question now is whether CEOs and other business leaders are content to remain part of the problem, or whether they have the will and the audacity to ride the rising breakthrough wave, driving the market revolutions that will unleash radically different forms of value creation. The series of articles have been written by John Elkington and Susie Braun, who are both with a group called Volans out of the UK. John is also a non-executive director at Sustainability. His latest book is The Zero Noughts, Breaking the Sustainability Barrier. He blogs at johnelkington.com, and if you're on Twitter, you can follow him at VolansJohn, and also you can follow Susie at VolansSusie. This is Nick Anthony. You're listening to The Going Green Show. I'll be back after the break talking about local news, and indeed you can follow me on Twitter, Indigo Nick, or go to myseek.org and you'll find all the information about this afternoon's show and indeed our Twitter account. Stay tuned. I'll be back. And it's Going Green, show number 69. Let's take a look at the local news. And every week we do review the Phuket News newspaper. It is a weekly, comes out on Friday afternoons, and you can pick it up all around the island. It's also owned by the same parent as our own radio station here at 89.5 FM. And we take a look at the news with respect to what we call the Compass program. It's a program set up by the Atkinson Group out of Sweden, and they use a model called Compass to plan a sustainable future. They use things called indicators or programs that fall under the four corners of a compass. N for nature, E for economy, S for society, and W for well-being. And of course, all news generally impacts one of the others. Taking a look at this week's newspaper, plenty of green articles. Firstly, on page 5, an article about Phuket City ready to meet water shortages. Indeed, we are getting into crunch time. It's the end of March. We've had limited rain in the first quarter of this year, about 60 millimeters of rain versus a general first quarter average of about 240 millimeters. So we're well down, about 75% down on rainfall. However, the Deputy Mayor of Phuket City says that they will be able to handle water shortages so long as rain comes before end of April. And that will only be some issues in Phuket town, where they do continue to buy some from the private sector, some water. About 20% is bought from the private sector, and 10% comes from the Provincial Waterworks Authority, the balance from their own reservoirs. They say that there are no shortage expected in other parts of the island. However, one thing that has just come over over the news yesterday is the fact that they're saying this year for Songkran, coming up in a couple of weeks' time, that there is not going to be allowed any pickup trucks with big water containers on the back. So for the first time in Songkran, they've announced that they are going to limit the amount of water that's going to be given away or used during Songkran. It's usually a fairly critical time for Phuket Songkran. It's often at the end of our summer season, at our hottest period, and indeed with low dams and a water crisis on our hands, throwing away massive volumes of water seems rather crazy. So watch out, it's going to be slightly different Songkran this year. Taking a look at page number 10 is an article about guns being seized in Phetchaburi. There was a female elephant that was killed a couple of weeks ago with a calf in the national park in Phetchaburi. And as a direct result of that, 375 police and army individuals launched raids on Monday last week in 4 tambons in the Hua Hin district. They raided over 111 locations. They seized 82 rifles, 8 shotguns, and several handheld hunting weapons. They did obtain a list of potential suspects, and they said that it was killed by poachers, farmers, or by local hunters. Looks like 22 was used to kill that elephant. The gathered evidence now will be archived and could be used for further investigation. So hopefully they do catch the person that killed both the elephant mother and its calf. It's very sad news. Also in news, page 11, an article about cameras in Bangladesh being used to track tigers. Part of the West Bengal state is a beautiful tiger reserve. It's actually near the Sundarbans, near the coast, and they have still about 440 Royal Bengal tigers on the Bangladeshi side. However, there has been some poaching, and this is an effort by them to limit the poaching that's been going on. The WWF says that there's about 1,800 Bengal tigers living in the wild, and including 1,300 in India alone. So good news for tiger protection. The TAT has announced a new campaign to get people to support bicycle tourism. That's very good news. It'll create more local revenue in local communities and at the provincial level. There are a number of cycle tour companies in Thailand already, and saying that the market is growing by about 20% per year. Records show the bicycle travel sector earned as much as 900 million baht in tourism revenue in 2012. So good news there for bicyclers all around here on Phuket, with such a fantastic support for triathlons in particular. We do see on a daily basis a huge number of bicyclists out and about. So when you're driving, please take care, give them the space they need, and remember, they're taking the slow life, so just take your foot off the gas and give them a little bit of space. Bicyclists are out there and enjoying the fresh air and indeed saving energy by bicycling to work or bicycling to play. In the life section, in this week's edition of the Phuket News, Jody Hooton on the first page investigates if it's about time that we brought back the Magic Eyes environmental campaign. For those of you who don't know what that is, it was a very funky little set of eyes effectively saying, "We're watching you." So if somebody's about to litter, it was a campaign a few years ago with school kids, I think in the early 2000s, and it was quite a successful campaign, particularly in Bangkok and the regions around Bangkok. And it talks in the article about Deborah, who I've been working with, who's doing a great job, Deborah Miasak, and she has been walking around the Bangwad Dam, and particularly was troubled with the amount of litter that was there and the fact that it was a very difficult change So she started with some stickers that went up the last couple of weeks, and she's now been able to get the support of the local government to use a campaign, and they've chosen to go back again with the Magic Eyes campaign. So very good news. The theme of the Magic Eyes is also the idea of respecting your elders and respecting nature, something that we need to continue to push for more on Phuket. There are these campaigns coming through on Phuket. Phuket is changing quite dramatically. We're seeing community involvement in beach cleanups. We're seeing local Orbitor involvement in beach cleanups and community cleanups. And over the next 12 months, we're going to see more and more local Orbitors and associations start to do curbside recycling. And lastly, in the local newspaper, a great article, an interview with one of my good mates, John Gray. Ling Yai, as he's called, the big monkey, is the founder and the forefather of the modern environmental movement here on Phuket. He's been a staunch advocate for a green Phuket, and he's a doer, not a talker. And indeed, John, for over 20 years, has been hosting sea canoe trips out into the wilds of Phang Nga Bay and further south towards the Malaysian border. And he comes from a wonderful history of activism. He was involved originally in Hawaii, bringing a campaign called Keep the Country Country to the North Shore of Oahu. And that was a fantastic result where they were able to limit the developers on the North Shore and also protecting a giant green sea turtle colony on that North Shore. And now it's a must-stop on the Circle Island tour for tourists, and it's the number one visitor experience. So supporting nature, supporting the local environment. Here on the island, we're blessed with turtles, we're blessed with dolphins, we're blessed with whale sharks, and we're blessed with a wonderful marine life. However, we've been, over the last 20 years, degrading it at such a pace that we're getting to a critical phase. There has been 5 turtle hatches over the last 3 months, all up in the north of Phuket. They're all leatherbacks. 3 of those 5 females did lay eggs that have indeed hatched. There's about, I think, over 200 eggs were laid. So really wonderful news. First time in about 7 years, according to Kun Pech from the WWF yesterday I was speaking with. And they were able to now incubate those and hatch leatherback turtles. So that's really good news. Also, there's been a sighting of a turtle off the Kamala headland. So there the water is looking cleaner. There's less plastic. And it seems that we're getting some marine life back again. There was also a spotting of a whale shark off Chalong just a couple of weeks ago by Seabees Diving. So we do have nice marine life here, and Phuket can be a vibrant, natural place. But it does require all of us to be vigilant with trash, picking up garbage on the beaches, picking up pieces of string from the fishing boats, and generally doing whatever you can to support the rehabilitation and the reintroduction of marine life here on Phuket. Good news, Phuket. Keep it up. This is Nick Anthony listening to The Going Green, show number 69.
With the issues that matter to the island, the environment, and the planet, this is Going Green with Nick Anthony on Live 89.5.
What a fabulous song. That was The Cure with The Love Song. Indeed, it's a love affair with Phuket, but for Phuket to stay in a love affair with its residents and, of course, its locals, we need to ensure that it's going to be a clean island, and it's a sustainable island. Phuket's high season is waning, and the winds continue to whip from the west to the east. With these westerlies brings ocean trash to our beaches, and our island is amid a litter and trash crisis, with increasing waste volumes getting up to now as much as 750 tons per day during this peak season. Despite positive changes, particularly in 2012, there continues to be a littering problem. The promotion of Phuket Green Island, with the goals of a sustainable, low-carbon island, strengthened in 2012, the local government, private businesses, and individuals have worked together to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We're facing a crisis of overcapacity and many decades of overexploitation, natural area degradation, and we need to aggressively pursue both short and long-term goals to ensure Phuket Island is sustainable. The local NGO Seek, and you can check it out at myseek.org, have been working on an island-wide sustainability plan that will be launched this year in conjunction with local government as well as with the governor. They've worked with the Atkinson Group out of Sweden and indeed have a plan for effectively 2020. So it's a good medium to long-term plan that looks at everything from waste through education to energy sufficiency and climate change and the impact of climate change on our island. So good news that we will continue to push for longer-term change and longer-term sustainability on the island. But we do need your support, and that needs support at monitoring litter campaigns, helping to clean up roadsides and indeed the beaches. And if you do see some plastic in the ocean, or you see some string, or indeed flip-flops, or whatever sort of garbage, polystyrene on the beaches, please do pick it up, bearing in mind that turtles will eat it as they mistake normally plastic bags for jellyfish. Speaking of turtles, we had a fantastic afternoon yesterday, thanks to Sean Panton up at the Jellyby Marriott and the whole team for putting on a fabulous event. There were about 80 turtles released, courtesy of the Phuket Marine Biological Centre, the PMBC, which is down next to the aquarium in Panwa. You can go down anytime, go check out their facilities and take a look at the turtle breeding centre. The centre is open to the public. You can see the containers, the big holding pens there on the ocean side, facing to the south, and you can take a look at both their new breed turtles that are hatchlings that are being prepared for release, as well as some of the more unfortunate turtles that have had flippers cut from either fishing nets or from being hit by boats, and they end up being in the PMBC long term and have a life that's unfortunately a tougher one ahead of them. The Jellyby Marriott is currently completing its plans to build a turtle rehabilitation centre up at the Maikau Beach. They will host between 3 to 5 of these older incapacitated turtles in that facility, and it'll be done in conjunction with a new book that I've written called Tommy the Turtle, which will be sold up at the Marriott and also given away to schools and made part of the local education program. It's all about a turtle that eats a plastic bag, nearly dies, comes up on the beach, and gets saved by a baby elephant that wraps its trunk around the plastic, pulls it out, and saves Tommy's life. So you too can save Tommy's life by cleaning up the beaches and taking the plastic out of the water. Okay, let's take a quick look at a couple of things here on the island, particularly tomorrow, Sunday, a fantastic event over at Bliss Beach Club. It's a day of stand-up paddling for the whole family, and the Stand-Up Projects, which is an adventure company supporting sustainable community projects, is doing a full-day event tomorrow from midday through the afternoon. You can just turn up, you can jump on board a stand-up paddle and learn how to use one. There'll be some races also, short sprint, family race, an island relay, and indeed an elite race. Raising money for the local community. They're raising money also for a skateboard park that they would like to build. And they've been raising money for the Good Shepherd School, which is over in Kossiray and looks after underprivileged Burmese kids. So great family event tomorrow, starting off at midday. You can just turn up and go see Tim and the guys over there, and indeed go have a great day. Sam from Breakfast will be over there tomorrow afternoon, so make sure you pop over and say hi and tell him what great music he puts on here at 89.5. Briefly, we'll take a quick look at some of the international news taking place over the week. There was a conference that I had the fortunate timing to listen to quite late the other night called The State of the Planet. It's actually an annual event where they have a conference looking at different issues, and this particular conference was talking about a world at risk and specifically water security. We just talked about Songkran problems here with lack of water and the fact that the local government is now stopping pickup trucks from having large containers of water on the back of their trucks and effectively throwing it away. We are in a position where water is scarce and we must maintain what we have. Indeed, there are 2 businesses I know of in Surin Beach in the last 2 weeks that have run out of water for the first time ever. They've been drawing water from the water table below, and for the first time ever, they've actually ran out of water, so now have to purchase water. It's going to be increasingly a problem on Phuket as the groundwater becomes both polluted as it runs dry, and as it does get sucked up, it becomes also more brackish or saltish as it draws salt water into the groundwater. Well, the world at risk on water security was a very interesting all-day seminar looking at the impact of population and climate change on water constraints. They were looking at the ability of societies to deal with these threats and asking the questions about the provision of safe drinking water and access of industries for water. In fact, industry and agriculture account for over 70% of all water used. There are limits to energy production, mineral extraction, and there are impacts there of the degraded water bodies on ecosystems. So that was on the BBC. stateoftheplanet.org is the website where it has a full recap and a recording of that conference. Stay tuned. This is Nick Anthony. I'll be back with the final wrap in a few moments for Going Green show number 69. Thanks for joining this afternoon. Well, the BBC had a great special this last week on what if everyone in the world had a car. Of course, it would be global gridlock. They were looking at solutions on how to maintain potentially as many as 4 times as many cars on the road as there are today. There's currently 1 billion cars in the world today, and they're saying by the middle of the century there could be 4 times as many, and particularly with the growing middle classes of countries like India, China, and Brazil. Well, if so many people want to drive, how will we prevent global gridlock? They were looking at small cars, they were looking at foldable cars, they were looking at smart cars, they were looking at smart driving systems to be able to get people to drive closer together, computer-assisted driving so that you can, in fact, push your car into automatic and take your foot off the brake. It helps on places like highways where slow-moving traffic actually gets very stop and start from people who don't pay attention, whereas if it was computer-driven from the cars, it would actually make highway driving much smoother and would make cars much more motion-orientated rather than stop-orientated. There's also been a great interest the last few weeks, particularly this week with the New York Motor Show, in announcing new electric cars. Mercedes-Benz announced their first all-electric car. There's been an announcement of a car-sharing electric car organization in Singapore called S-Move. It's basically a timeshare for cars. And in The Guardian this week, they had an article about Peugeot's new hybrid Air. It is indeed potentially the car of the future, as it does run, as it says, on air. It'll be cheaper than a Toyota Prius, do more than 80 miles to the gallon, and could completely shake up the car industry. It was announced in January and was released at the Geneva Motor Show earlier this month. And they say that's now going to be in production in 2016. It works with a 4-foot-long accumulator, looks like a scuba tank down the middle of the car. And it's a pressurized steel tank filled with around 20 liters of nitrogen, plus some hydraulic fluid. Much like a Prius, hybrid air vehicles recover energy every time the driver brakes or decelerates. But instead of using this kinetic energy to charge a battery, as electric hybrids do, this hybrid air system has a reversible hydraulic pump that compresses the nitrogen in the tank and unleashes it the next time the driver pumps the accelerator. So it's kind of like a syringe. So quite a simple strategy and quite an interesting one. Another advantage over hybrids already on the market is that Peugeot's new cars do not require an expensive lithium-ion battery or an electric motor, meaning that they'll start from around $17,000. It's about $5,000 less than a Prius. Oh yeah, an interesting one. Bloomberg announced a start of a program they've been looking at with the help of BP, looking at renewable reserves. In my earlier career as a youngster, I worked with a stockbroker, and I looked at gold miners across Australia and worked at proven and probable reserves. Well, BP, in association with the Bloomberg New Energy Finance Group, have started looking at renewable energy in the global energy mix, and they're trying to work out the basis for renewable reserves. They started off with just wind and bioenergy sectors in the US and Brazil, and somewhat surprisingly, they found renewable reserves from potentially commercial projects in the US are over 3 times higher than those of existing projects. The commercial and potentially commercial reserves from wind and biofuels are almost as large as the US's proved oil reserves. That also does not show, of course, solar and other types of renewable energy. So very, very good news. It's a start of the Renewable Reserves Initiative, which is a group formed of industry stakeholders, and they're working to develop a methodology to enable the evaluation of renewable reserves using a framework consistent with the UNFC 2009 methodology. It was commissioned by BP, and it's intended to complement the work of the RRI by demonstrating the concept for wind and bioenergy resources in the US and Brazil. In India, a new tiger reserve has been formed. That's a sanctuary that now covers 350,000 acres in the Tamil Nadu state. Very good news. WWF India has been working there since 2002 with the Tamil Nadu State Forest Department to establish anti-poaching camps, improving communications through wireless networks, training frontline staff, and more recently, tiger monitoring. So great news for tigers. IMF is calling for an end to energy subsidies. They say that removing worldwide fossil fuel subsidies worth nearly $2 trillion a year would have major gains for economic growth and the environment. That's courtesy of Business Green. And lastly, in international news, NOAA, the group out of the US responsible for looking at global weather, is already saying that drought in the US in 2013 is going to be worse than 2012. They're saying that drought conditions in more than half of the United States have slipped into a pattern that climatologists say is uncomfortably similar to the most severe droughts in U.S. history, including the 1930s Dust Bowl and the widespread 1950s drought. The 2013 drought season is already off to a worse start than in 2012 or 2011. They say that the entire year will be drier than last year, even if spring and summer rainfall and temperatures remain the same. If rainfall decreases and temperatures rise, as climatologists are predicting, then the drought could be even more severe. Federal researchers also say there's less than a 20% chance the drought will end in the next 6 months. All this news and more, including videos such as this NOAA a spring drought forecast, is all available to view at myseek.org. You can go to the top section, top right-hand button, has a button called News and Events. Skim down to this week's Going Green radio show. Click on it, and you'll see all of the information and some new videos. I will also say a couple of new videos that have gone up is a good interview by Miss Gunn from Greenfins, talking about beach recycling. That's in Thai and was on PBS. It's a 25-minute show, but you can check that up on the website. There's the new video for the Turtle Foundation, and also a video called Plastic Bags, the Silent Killer. Also all on the website. Well, from all of us here at 89.5, thanks very much for listening today. I do hope you enjoyed the show. Have a fantastic evening tonight and a great weekend. Here on Phuket, it needs your help to make it a better place. And first steps, of course, to be aware. Think about your actions. Refuse single-use plastic bags, straws, and polystyrene. Reduce your waste. Reduce energy use. Reuse what you can, including composting. And recycle as much of what's left as possible. Be responsible to our planet, and be responsible to Phuket. Do tell others about what you're doing. Do join other campaigns. And as a good example, you can go to Facebook and you can join Seek, S-E-E-K Phuket, or you can join the Kamala Green Club and take a look there at their plans for the upcoming off-season when winds coming from the west will deposit more garbage on our beaches. And it's going to need all of us to get out there and keep the place clean. Thanks very much. Nick Anthony signing out from Going Green show number 69.